Gadget's field trip.
We're going on a visit.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Come on, let's go with him.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
What's that, you ask? What is it?
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Well, no one wants to miss it.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
We're going on a visit.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Come on, let's go with him.
New places, new faces. Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Inspector Gadget here in the middle of Sherwood Forest. Robin Hood should be swinging by any minute. Unless we're in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., in which case scores of lobbyists will be swinging by any minute. Either way, it's a jungle out there. Washington, D.C. is the home of the nation's treasures, and they're stacked head high in all of D.C.'s museums. The D.C. stands for District of Columbia, which is sandwiched between the states of Virginia and Maryland. Right in the center of Washington is a castle fit for a king. But since we don't have a king, we made it into a museum. It's the Smithsonian Institution, but it's called the Castle, in case some out-of-work king comes by to claim it. Inside are over 141 million objects, including the body of James Smithson. Boy, will he be surprised when he finds out. If you want to see everything, you better look fast. Go, go, Gadget Turbo Eyeballs! Don't blink! It's easy to see why the Smithsonian is also known as America's Attic, though it's not at all stuffy and the ceiling isn't pointy. Would you believe the Smithsonian is made up of 16 museums? Would you believe 3 closets? This is the Museum of Natural History, also known as the National Museum of Man. And here's one very clean man. He's called the Soap Man. Actually, he's a mummy from the 1700s. His body changed to soap after he died because he was buried in very wet ground. It's a natural scientific phenomenon. Either that or he didn't have time to take a bath. This is either the world's biggest grandfather clock or Foucault's pendulum. Watch this to witness the Earth's rotation. If it makes you dizzy, don't blame me. Blame John Foucault. It's named after him. If that brass bull suspended from the ceiling always swings across the same spot in the center of the circle, how come it keeps knocking down the ring of dominoes? My gadget computer says it's because the floor under the pendulum is moving. Strange. I can't feel it moving. Aha! I've got it. The floor isn't moving. The Earth is. Just think. These butterflies flew thousands of miles just to rest in the nice drawers in the Smithsonian Insect Collection. Wait, that's not a butterfly. That's my bow tie. They also have the bone room where fossils include bones of a 20-million-year-old camel from Nebraska. This couldn't be him. I don't see any humps. Here we are at the Museum of American History. Look, it's President Teddy Bear. Actually, This teddy bear is not a president, but it was named after President Teddy Roosevelt. That's because when he was on a hunting trip, he saved a bear cub's life. Now here's a bright idea, a light bulb display. Thomas Edison is a part of American history, but he changed the whole world with his inventions, like the light bulb. The on switch didn't hurt either. Edison also invented this, the first phonograph, which is like a CD player, only old. The National Air and Space Museum is where you can learn everything about flying machines, like why they go up. Back in 1927, Charles Lindbergh made the first non-stop solo flight across the ocean to Europe in this plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. He flew out of Long Island, New York, but the Spirit of New York isn't much of a name for a plane, especially since donors in St. Louis paid for the plane. This plane had a few problems, like no front window. The fuel tank had to be installed where the window should have been to keep the plane balanced. Lindbergh had to use a periscope or stick his head out the side window to see. He probably kept his head out the window just to stay awake. His flight was 33 hours and 30 minutes long, about the same time it would take you to get to the airport in light traffic. This flying machine looks like my great-uncle Propeller Gadget's Buck's kite. It flew like it, too. You see, back in 1899, two brothers named Orville and Wilbur Wright asked the Smithsonian for every bit of information they had on aerodynamics. Apparently, they found the information useful, because 4 years later, they decided to fly this thing. They tossed a coin to see who would go up. Wilbur won and crash landed. After they fixed it, Orville took his turn and flew this flyer into the record books. It was the first manned aircraft to raise itself on its own power and stay under control. The flight went 120 feet and lasted 12 seconds. I've had sneezes that lasted longer than that. But that's where air travel began. How did the Smithsonian get its name? Well, Fred was taken, but James Smithson was an Englishman dedicated to learning. He died in 1829 and left a donation of $500,000 to the U.S. government to be used to expand knowledge. There's something you don't see every day, unless you live at the museum. It's the grassy area between the museums called the Mall, but you can't shop here. If you think all those museums made you dizzy, try riding on this one-of-a-kind carousel. And look at those horses. If an irate goat butts you off for bad merry-go-round riding, you might land at the Hirshhorn Museum, which is also owned by the Smithsonian. They've got famous sculptures here by famous artists such as Rodin, Picasso, and Calder. And a lot of not very famous sculptures by a lot of not very famous artists whose names we don't even know. Hey, maybe I should take credit for a few of these myself. In honor of America's African-American heritage, there's an entire museum devoted to collecting beautiful and unique art from Africa. It's called the National Museum of African Art and is another part of the Smithsonian experience. The Smithsonian might be the largest museum in town, but it isn't the only one. Here at the National Museum of Health and Medicine, we can see the famous life mask of Abe Lincoln. You know, the guy on the $5 bill. Guess why the plaster cast of Lincoln's right hand is bigger than that of his left hand? Give up? At the time, Lincoln's right hand was swollen from all the handshaking he did during his presidential campaign. Luckily, he wasn't into kissing babies. He'd have lips like ping-pong paddles. In Washington, everyone and his daughter has a museum, even the daughters of the American Revolution. They have all kinds of old games in the children's attic for all the old children. Wowzers! Here's a chilling exhibit. Meet Juanita. She's a 500-year-old Peruvian mummy that was discovered in an ice floe near a volcano. Because she's been on ice, she's perfectly preserved, from her hair right down to her liver, though her eyeliner apparently wasn't permanent. She was part of a revolving exhibit at the National Geographic Society Explorers Hall. And from personal experience, I can tell you it's a lot easier to get to the museum than to an ice floe by a volcano. Here's a nice little house, and when I say little, I mean little. It's a dollhouse at the Washington Dolls House and Toy Museum. Everything is miniature. This miniature elevator even runs. Ever wonder where the old hero ships go to retire? Washington Navy Yard and the Navy Museum is a retirement home for some venerable victorious vessels. Where the sailors go, I'm not sure. You can even look through the periscopes. You know, my Uncle Barnacle Gadget was a periscope in a very large bathtub before he was assaulted by a rabid rubber ducky. And now an Inspector Gadget field trip fact. Those are paddle boats for everyone to try at the beautiful tidal basin. You can pedal a paddle boat, or is it paddle a pedal boat, through the puddle? Either way, the faster you pedal, the faster you get through the puddle. Unless you forget to pull up the anchor, in which case you can just call it an aerobics class. Until next time, go Gadget Field Trip.
Beak.